Games in this podcast range from E to M.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Malik Prince, and welcome back to the official Xbox podcast. And once again, I'm on location, this time at, you guessed it, Obsidian Entertainment. You may know them most recently from releasing games such as The Outer Worlds, Grounded, Pentiment. But today we're here to talk about a game that is just 3 months away. And yes, I'm talking about Avowed. Now, they are no strangers to the official Xbox podcast. We've definitely had them on the show before, but never quite like this. So they've invited me out to their studio here in beautiful, sunny Irvine, California, to not only see the game, but play the game. Not only play the game, but play a section of the game that no one has seen before outside of these walls. I'm also gonna get to talk to the devs and learn a little bit about their culture. So let me quit yapping, because you're not here for that. Let's get right to it. All right, now it's the moment of truth. I am going inside the studio. Let me knock on the door, see who answers. Who could it be? It's Carrie Patel. Carrie, how's it going?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for welcoming me into this beautiful studio, your beautiful abode.
Well, thank you for coming to visit.
Of course, of course. And I was telling everybody watching that you are no stranger to the Xbox podcast. We've talked about Avowed quite a few times, not quite like this, but this time we're 3 months away from launch. How are you feeling? How's the team feeling?
I'm excited, and so is the team. Right now, we're fixing bugs, doing final polish and final tuning, but more than anything, we're excited to get Avowed into the hands of our fans and excited to see what kinds of experiences players create for themselves.
Oh, nice. And I'm excited to get hands-on today, so be jealous. But as we walk through the studio, it's very clear the reverence you have for games you've released. We have Pentiment over here, this beautiful image of Grounded, a game that so many people have played and loved. In your opinion, what do you think makes an Obsidian game an Obsidian game?
So for us, an Obsidian game is really about creating a rich, reactive, and interactive world for players to put themselves into, experiment, and see their choice and consequences play out in real time, and also giving players a really meaty role to inhabit in the game. Something where they can see not just the narrative consequences of their choices, but also make mechanical decisions about how they build their character, how they play, and how they progress through the world.
Yeah, and we saw a little bit of that during the post-Xbox Game Showcase podcast, where you brought in that awesome build of the game. And again, to your point on the narrative choices people were able to make, or the different ways you tackle the mission, whether it's stealth or going in sword slashing, like it's really great to see that. And so I love that answer. But I want to go back to a little bit about the studio culture, because there's certain ways that you kind of honor some of the teammates that you have here, some of the studio members, right?
Yeah, so we're not just developers, we're also players, and that means playing our own games as well. So each of us has a little pennant on the door to our office, and that celebrates how many years we've been with the studio. So Matt and Brandon here have both been here 15 years, and also the games that we've completed natural playthroughs of. So Brandon here has quite the collection of playthrough pins.
Oh, which is so cool. Even for like new employees to come in and see sort of how you honor the devs at the studio and the people, to your point, players of the games that they make. It's just a really cool thing, and it's got to feel really good for those new folks that come in. So now, what would you say, in your opinion, you're most excited for players to experience when they jump into Avowed?
I'm really excited to see just the way players build and progress their own characters. One of the most exciting things from the runs we've been doing lately with press has just been seeing the very different experiences that people get with different kinds of builds. That means builds with different abilities, different weapon loadouts, and different ways of approaching combat. Those things all can feel very different, and I just love seeing how players make a play through their own, both through the way that they build and progress their characters, and also through the choices they make moment to moment.
It's all about playing the way you want. So set it up for us here today, Carrie. What am I going to be experiencing?
So you're going to be experiencing the first couple hours of the game.
Nice.
So that includes a brief introductory level where we'll introduce you to not only the mechanics, but also the world, your role as the envoy of Adir. And after that, you'll get into Dawnshore, which is the first major region of the game. And there you'll get a sense for the Living Lands, which is this very vibrant, colorful world. And you'll also get a sense for some of the conflicts and tensions between the Adirans, who are your people, and the locals of the Living Lands. And you'll get to meet your first companion, Kai.
Ooh, what a tease, what a tease. I'm excited to jump in. Carrie, thank you so much for introing me into the studio.
Thank you.
So excited to play the game when it releases in February, but I'm gonna get to play it today.
You know, for most people, getting sent to the living lands is a punishment.
All right, everyone, we are here again to talk about Avowed. I just got to play the game, and I just want to say it is really incredible, but you don't have to take my word for it. I'm going to talk with some people who actually worked on the game. It's the awesome Avowed devs. I'm going to allow you all to introduce yourself. We'll start with you, Kate.
My name is Kate Dollarhide. I'm a narrative designer on Avowed.
Awesome.
I'm Matt Hansen. I am the art director on Avowed.
I'm Berto Ritker. I'm a region director on Avowed.
Kate, Matt, and Berto. These folks are making an incredible game. I played it for the first time today. I just want to say, incredible. It's one thing to kind of hear about a game for so long. It's a different thing to finally get hands-on with the game. And it was very clear a lot of the direction, choices that you all made and really dialing into what makes an Obsidian game an Obsidian game is what I was talking with Carrie about earlier. From your perspective, I know you're 3 months away. How are you feeling? Little bit of pressure? Feeling good?
I'm excited. I think it's always a little scary, sharing something you've been working on with your team for so long, but I'm excited for fans to play the game.
Nice. Well, let's dive into it because we're not going to show too much of it, but I want to talk about the character creator because it's really robust. There's a lot of presets, as you know, and many of you may know, you're playing as a godlike, and that manifests itself with various different things on your face, which you can also turn off. But there's also, it's more than just your appearance, it's your background. I know, Kate, you worked a lot on the narrative. What was it like building some of the backgrounds for players? Because obviously a lot of what they choose in that setting then translates into like how characters perceive you, NPCs perceive you. So what was it like building those? Yeah,
it was a process of really just looking at where the player comes from and trying to figure out how that's going to inform their role play suite, essentially. What are the boundaries of the role play experience here? So the player character is from Adir. They are a member of the court in some way. So we needed backgrounds that really suited that experience, right? The closeness to the emperor that really justified them being sent as an envoy to the Living Lands. So what feels right for the setting? Can I ask, which one did you pick?
Ooh, I'm glad you asked, Kate, actually, because I wrote it down. I was the Arcane Scholar.
Oh, that's my favorite one.
And I chose that because, so for those of you who haven't seen it yet, the Arcane Scholar graduates with honors, and I like to consider myself an intelligent person, okay? And that's what I like to, but I want to go to Matt and Berto because, this game takes place in the Pillars of Eternity universe. Pillars, of course, an isometric game, and now you're building this game as a first-person game. What were some of the considerations in, showcasing the world that you all had to think about?
Sure. I mean, there's lots of design considerations. I'll leave that to Berto, but from a purely art standpoint, people look up. That's the biggest, most obvious thing. When you're working with an isometric game, you've got a fixed camera. You know exactly how everything's going to be laid out for the player at any given moment. So you can cheat a lot of stuff. You can do some really, really fun smoke and mirrors there. And you lose access to a lot of that in a 3D space. So a lot of the challenges that we face, and this is true for any first-person game, is that you need to be able to draw the player's attention where you want them to look, but also give them interesting things to see if they're just perusing the world like I do. I'm a big wanderer when I play games, and I'm just looking at, ooh, what's over here, what's over there, And so making sure there's things that are interesting there. Sometimes there's little secrets for you to find, little insights to the quests you might be playing that aren't necessarily critical information, but curious players will find those things. Yeah. But also to finding, and this is sort of going into Berto's realm a little bit, but finding good opportunities for players to, while they're exploring in 3D, kind of go, oh, I want to climb up there and see what's up there, and then giving them a reward for that, which I'll hand off to you there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want you to look around. We know you're going to look around. And so we design spaces so that they'll guide you forward along the kind of main direction that we want the quest or the area to flow. But then as you turn around, you might look around a corner and realize, oh, there's actually a path this way. Where does that go? And that'll lead you to little found secrets, narrative storytelling, another encounter or loot or uniques, that sort of stuff. And so it's both in a first-person environment, it's a lot more freedom in how you look at things, but we also have a parkour and climbing system, so that allows the space to get a lot more vertical than in the past. So
yeah, and that's something I definitely noticed as I was playing earlier. Is like I felt like I got rewarded for exploring and going and like reading the notes, right, and getting the backstory. There's a scene early in the game when there's like this prisoner. She's trapped behind this gate, and you can choose. I chose to let her out. I don't know if you cannot choose to let her out.
You can.
You sure can.
Oh, really?
You can leave her there, and there's some fun consequences if you do.
Oh, see, this is what I love is going to be the theme, is play the way you want. You're going to see a lot of that. And so I let her out, but I was able to kind of go and look into, when I was going to get the key to let her out, there was like a note that explained like what she did and how she was kind of being rude to the people who captured her. And so it was just cool to see that, again, you get as much out of the game as you put into it from the exploration standpoint. Now, Matt, what you said a little bit earlier on like the vistas and kind of looking around, that's one of the things I noticed. If we can go back a little bit, and we're actually watching footage, just for everyone at home, I played the game. Jeff, of course, Xbox Podcast Extraordinaire, also played the game. And so you may see some of the gameplay from both of us here, but look at this world. It is incredible. I think you all have built such, I mean, visually speaking, like just looking at the vistas and how far you can see in the distance, it's incredible. And I'm sure as you're building a game, you're thinking, Kate, on like, hey, what does this mean for the story? Like, what are the places, like, what are the towns that I'm trying to build to kind of communicate? It feels like a living and breathing world, I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like Berto area designers, they want to create these like really cool little paths, these fun secret areas. But then when you create a secret area, there has to be content that goes there, right?
Of course.
So then, it's narrative and area talking back and forth of like, okay, well, what can we do with this cool little pocket, this little corner of the world, right? What can we put here that tells a fun story? In the Dawnshore area, I got to do a fun one where we called back to one of the Pillars of Eternity DLCs. Mm-hmm. Those characters had come to this place and left evidence of their passage. And I think that's going to be really fun. There's tons of little things like that throughout the world for players of the previous game. Players that are new to the world of AR, just fun stuff to discover.
Yeah. And then part of that, Matt, from designing the characters and NPCs around the world, even like the way they dress, I'm jealous of the suspenders. I feel like I could rock them, maybe not as good as you.
Nah, you'd pull it off.
Okay. That makes me feel so good. Thank you. But I'm sure that that's a part of it too, like making the player feel like they're encountering characters who have their own style and have their own kind of way of expressing themselves is an important part in that as well, in telling the story.
Absolutely. We're trying to encapsulate the culture of these people, perhaps some of their own personal preferences, to just make them more believable as living entities and not just, a guy that's waiting to talk to you. So there's a big component of that. There's also mechanical components to it as well. We want to, if we have combatants, illustrate for the player, like, that guy's in heavy armor. We know they're going to be harder to hit. They've got a big purple sash. We know they're associated with Edir, that sort of thing. So we're trying to leverage the visuals to not only make the world feel a lot more robust and believable, but also give critical gameplay information to players.
Yeah, awesome. And then, Berto, I wanted to talk a little bit about Dawnshore, because one of the things that I think about when I play role-playing games is that very first area in a game. Yeah. And like that sets the tone for the entire game. And so from your perspective, like what were some of your goals and objectives in building that area and how to like really make the player feel like?
There's a lot we want to introduce you to as a new player or someone who might be familiar with the world. So we want to kind of balance, like, here's a little bit of tidbits of stuff, callbacks to previous Pillars games, and stuff that'll onboard you into this world. But on top of that, we also are trying to kind of express the history of the living lands and this space. Dawnshore is the first place you go to, so it's quite a bit less extreme than the later areas you go to. But you'll see there's all these ruined gray buildings around, and those are the Pargruna, and they came to the living lands a long time ago. And so everybody's kind of built up on top of their structures. And so that's just told through the environment art. But that's one aspect of it. And then we also want to show that the nature is getting more extreme. It's creeping towards, like, as you go further into the wilderness, it gets more and more extreme. And you'll see that even in like the level design will get more meandering a bit as you get into the more extreme areas. So yeah, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it because, again, I really felt like it set the tone for the entire game and every part of the game, the demo that I played after that. I want to go into a little bit of combat. And so this is something that obviously players have been really excited to see. Tell us a little bit, Kate, about some of the enemy types that we're going to be encountering.
Sure. In the first area in particular, you're going to see Zorops, which are like humanoid lizard guys. Bears, of course, lots of enormous bears. Did you fight any bears when you played?
I did fight bears, and they stood no chance against me.
Oh,
I
really?
destroyed them. I destroyed
powerful.
them. I was
Just too strong,
What can I
huh?
say? What
Make a
can I
note.
say?
We got to tune the bears harder.
Bears.
Everyone's like, no, don't tell them that. Some people are, no, but it was great, and the enemy variety type was something that I loved. They're healers, obviously, long ranged sort of enemies that can attack, and then folks who are really good at shielding. And so I'm assuming that from a player perspective, as you're tackling these enemies, like we're seeing here, you really have to be dynamic in how you're choosing your abilities and how to build.
Yeah, it's a very elaborate game of rock, paper, scissors, basically. And while we allow the player to build a myriad of different combat styles, we want to make sure that underneath all of those, there are utilities that they can utilize to, combat different enemy types and make sure that combat's always a little interesting and spicy. It's a fun balancing act.
Yeah, for me, it was a sword and the grimoire in one hand, and that seemed to work really well for me.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah,
It's
it was
fun.
good. But then some of the enemies were really. I will say this, like I would say the combat's actually pretty challenging in a good way. It never felt unfair. It felt like whenever I did die, it felt like, okay, I understood what I did. I got too close to the enemy, or I wasn't using my power, like my spells enough, like to freeze the enemy where they were. I think that's great. And as we continue to see here, challenging and setting up a bit of a challenge for this player, Jeff. Of course. I will say in the notes Jeff sent over when he said he was fighting a bear, he said, of course, I beat the bear. All right, Jeff's he's a little cocky on that one. But speaking of bear, let's actually check out that gameplay of the boss bear, because I don't think I actually experienced this yet. I didn't get to this point yet. This is different than the regular bears that we see, or is this...
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This is a bear that's been afflicted with the dream scourge, which is what the Emperor sent the envoy, the player, to investigate here in the Living Lands. So this bear has been afflicted with the dream scourge. It's become a dream-thralled bear, and it's quite a bit more powerful and aggressive as a result of that.
Berto, from your perspective, like as you're building these worlds, and earlier the last fight we saw was outside, and there was places for the character to go and get a high ground, for example. And here it's a little bit different, a little darker, a little different tone.
Yeah.
What are some of the considerations as you're building like these worlds and where the players will encounter enemies?
Yeah, I think something I probably should have touched on in my like long meandering answer about designing Dawnshore.
I love
But one of the very important things as well in a first region is just giving you an introduction to the gameplay experience that in a way that's like well paced as a new player, and giving you the opportunity to experiment with any kind of weapon type or loadout you might want. So we want to give you reasonable access to as many weapons early, especially like base weapons, as possible, so you can mix and match and try those things out. And the environment will allow you to take like those range shots from high up, or go running in with a sword and board, or cast a bunch of spells. So you can do all those things. You can even use some of those abilities to get to areas of the map that wouldn't otherwise be accessible. So we want to design around that, and then also introduce you to the different archetypes of enemies, and ramp up as you get further. So like this Dream Thrall Bear here, quite a bit more difficult a little bit further into the main story. And along the way, you might, and hopefully will, get distracted by a whole bunch of other fun stuff, and then work your way up in power. By the time you get here, it's more of a satisfying challenge.
Yeah. All right, so I want to talk about the narrative. We talked a little bit earlier, Kate, about some of your ability to come off as a jerk a little bit, and some of the dialogue choices, which I, again, love in a game. But what I was surprised about was like how deep in conversation you can go. It is not just select a choice and then just exhaust all the choices and get out of the conversation. It's literally like a kind of branching task. And so 2 questions: how did you all find the time to make all of those dialogue options? And then 2, why was it so important to kind of go into depth?
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly takes quite a long time to create conversations in the way that we do at Obsidian. But the reason we do it is because player agency is really at the core of the gameplay experience here. And that is not just like you play your way in the open world, play with the weapons that you want, but also play your character the way you want to play them. And that means being able to take on personas as you want and really like drill down in conversation into the stuff that's really important to you. So, if you're talking to a character like Sansa, he's going to give you a quest, and you could, if you wanted to, beeline for the quest information, get it, and run off and go do that. Or you can really sit down and talk to him and get to know more about who he is. And we do that because we want the player to feel like the character is their own, that they're really making this character that they have in their head, and they're able to make characters that feel substantially different from each other.
And Berto, from your perspective, as you're building these quests, what were some of the goals that you and your team had in building those side quests and making them seem meaningful?
Yeah, so at Obsidian, we're very fond of missable content, honestly. Like, our games are full of it, and that's what our side quests really are. Like, at the end of the day, you're going to play some side quests, but not everybody's going to play the same combination of side quests. And so the whole experience is like, it's dynamic to how you play the game. You might stumble across like the midway point of a quest, like or a particular item or something that somebody wants, and then when you talk to them, you realize, oh, I already have this thing, or I killed that person, and then the quest adapts to that. So you can play things out of order. You can do things a little bit ahead of time if you end up doing that with your exploration. Yeah. We try to design around a well-paced player experience.
Well, it's super smart, and maybe this is a question for all three of you, just from your personal game preferences and the philosophy that you mentioned, Berto, because I'm interested in what is the allure of creating missable content? Because in maybe a regular player's head, it's like, well, why would you want to make something, put all this effort into a piece of content that somebody may not get to? But I guess why do you all cherish that aspect of the game so much?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll talk to that a little bit. I mean, for me, it's about creating a living world.
Yeah.
You know, if you're walking down the street, you don't go into every shop, but people are living their lives in there, right? And to some degree, we want to sort of sell that idea in the game as well. And so making sure that players get that sensation of this is a living world, I am but a character in it. And also, there's just the added nice thing of our games have a lot of replay value.
Yeah.
Even on that second or third or fourth playthrough, if you're playing 4 times, you're awesome. But on those subsequent playthroughs, you can still find content you never experienced before. Not just content that you're going through in a different way, but that you've just never found. And that's super important to us.
Yeah. I mean, even I wouldn't even call it this was a missable piece of content, but it wasn't like a mission. But as I got on the dock of Paradisi, is that what it's called?
Paradisi.
So I was walking off the dock, and then there was a conversation going off to the left, and they were talking, and I just wanted to peek over to see who was talking. And the NPC literally looked up at me and said, like, oh, someone's listening.
That's enough for now. You got a listener.
It was like that small, tiny little detail is such a cool thing that, to your point, Matt, makes it feel like a living world. It makes it feel like, man, these NPCs are reacting to everything that I do, even if, like, most people won't see that. It's just a cool thing to have in there.
It's funny you bring that up because I noticed for the first time, and I think this is probably your doing, in one of our last regions of the game, you're walking towards an ostensibly very important meeting you're about to have, and you can hear people arguing behind the door. And if you just walk in, they react and they go, oh, we have a visitor, and they stop. I sat there with the door closed for a good 3 minutes, and they just kept arguing. It was so good. It was so excellent. Fun fact, when you make games this big, all of us get surprised sometimes.
Yeah,
it's really
love
great.
that. All right, so Kate, the last thing I want to talk about is Party Camp, which is basically your chance to, rest, interact with your companions, and also reflect on the missions that you went. And can you talk a little bit more about what goes on in Party Camp?
Yeah, absolutely. So game like ours, it's very difficult to control the pacing, right? Because the player can go anywhere and do anything at any time. So we as designers don't necessarily know where they are at any given time. So it's difficult to pace the experience. So instead, what we want to do is allow the player to pace it for themselves. And that's kind of where Party Camp comes in. When they're out in the open zone, running around, killing monsters, there's high tension environment. Mm-hmm. Party Camp is a chance to step back and decompress with your companions, talk about the quests that you've done, talk about what everyone's going through, what their thoughts are on the main story overall, and also to upgrade your weapons and have a nap.
Yeah, which as a professional napper, I can appreciate. You'll know when the game comes out, February 18th, day one on Game Pass. What are you all most excited? I'll throw to all three of you. What are you most excited for players to experience when they jump in?
Ooh, my favorite things are spoilers. So I'll say in the first region that you've seen, the Dawn Treader dungeon, I think we showed off a little bit at Gamescom. It was my favorite piece of content to work on. It was an absolute blast to put together. Berto and I worked on it together with a few other fantastic folks. Yeah. And it was just a great experience. And I love how it came out. So I'm excited for people to see that.
Okay, so a little bit earlier in the game.
Yeah.
Awesome. Matt?
Boy, I'll go even earlier because I'm one of those cats that will spend like 3 hours in character creation.
Yeah.
And I know we'll probably talk about that more later, but I am really excited to see the weirdos that people make and then how they choose to play them in the world. You can make some real freaks. It's great. But beyond that, in general, just I'm really excited for people to holistically get to experience the world of Aora. And for a lot of people, this will be their first adventure into that world. And I'm hoping that some of them will get really excited by what they've played here and maybe dip their toe into Pillars 1 and 2.
I love that. Love that. Berto.
Honestly, it's very hard to pick favorites. I mean, Dawn Shredder would be up on the list, but I don't want to have just a very redundant list here. But in the spirit of that and just Dawn Shore generally and this world we built, like we're doing a lot of long playthroughs now that we're towards the end of the project. And I am just blown away constantly when I'm exploring the environment, stuff that I didn't even realize was in the game. And I tend to know a lot, particularly in the early game, like where things are just because I have to. But I'll stumble across things like, wow, I didn't realize somebody wrote this example here. There's like storytelling that incorporates into this character that I thought was just this little character that we've built upon over the years. And so, yeah, there's the feeling of exploration, wanderlust in the environment is just awesome, and I'm really excited for people to experience it.
Yeah, I mean, it was very apparent, like how much there is and how deep it goes from a dialogue perspective, from a play the way you want, whether it's combat-wise or you know, how you tackle a mission and the traversal. Like, there's just so many aspects of this game that I think people are going to be blown away. You're really going to love it. I'm not just saying that because I work. I promise you, it's good. It's gonna be something really special. So again, Avowed is out February 18th on Xbox and PC, and of course, day one with Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. And of course, if you pre-order the premium edition, you get to play up to 5 days early. So why wouldn't you want to do it? Kate, Matt, Berto, thank you so much for talking to me about Avowed. You all are building something like truly special. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.
Really appreciate it.